Maybe you can brief me something about the relationship between Cambodia and UK.
Okay, of course. Thank you very much indeed. I think it's a really important year for the UK in Cambodia at the moment because it's actually the 60th anniversary of the British Embassy in Cambodia. And I have to say I'm really pleased with the amount of ties that exist between the UK and Cambodia. We've worked together in more and more fields. So to give you some examples, the business relationship and trade relationship between the UK and Cambodia has grown from strength to strength. Last year we had $750 million worth of trade between the UK and Cambodia. We have loads of new British companies arriving in Cambodia and more investment, so I think that's a very positive area of our cooperation. The UK has also been one of the biggest supporters of development in Cambodia, and in the last 15 years or so we've given about $250 million worth of development assistance in a number of areas, including health, HIV, education, and we still today have here the largest mine action programme, largest British mine action programme anywhere in the world, which I think is a really positive thing. We have other areas of cooperation as well, like education for example, and I'm really pleased that more and more Cambodian students are accessing UK education and UK qualifications. We have some of the best educational institutions in the world in the UK. And separately we have over 100,000 British tourists visiting Cambodia every year, which is great, and they obviously learn about the country and support economic development here. And I think we also have a very good political dialogue here with the government on all sorts of issues, on things like justice. For instance, the UK is a strong supporter of the ECCC. We talk about issues like child protection, labour standards, human rights, and many other issues as well. So in summary, I'm very pleased that we have good cooperation here, and I'm pleased that those areas of cooperation are broadening every year.
Yeah. And are there any challenges to what you have had in Cambodia?
Well, I think we look for opportunities to enhance that cooperation. I think as a general point, one of the challenges in Cambodia is the fact that the development process really only got going about 20 years ago, and recent history is such that a lot of devastation and destruction was caused in the 1970s. So I think there is a broad development challenge here, but the UK is very strongly committed to supporting Cambodia's development, which of course has been very successful over the last 20 years.
Can you name like the real challenges that you met, like talking to the government, or its infrastructure, or?
Well, there are some very clear challenges. As I say, I see this as being a product of recent history in a way. So, for example, one area where the UK can make a very practical contribution is in education. Yeah. People's access to education here was very limited until just 15 or 20 years ago. And with the UK strength in education, we can help build the skills base. That's obviously something that will take a long time, but it's an area where we can contribute. You mentioned infrastructure as well. Obviously, a lot of the infrastructure in Cambodia was destroyed in the 1970s. So I think lots of different countries can support the government in rebuilding that infrastructure. And certainly when you travel around Cambodia today, you see infrastructure that wasn't there a few years ago. So I think this is something that's happening very quickly, and the international community can really contribute to this.
In your perspective, what do you think that Cambodia's government should do more in order to make the country like moving forward?
Well, I think there are all sorts of areas where the government is already very active, and those are some of the areas I've mentioned where we've been able to support. Education and infrastructure we've mentioned. I also mentioned the UK has been a very strong supporter of health sector support, and so the areas we focused on with our development programme over many years have been things like reducing maternal mortality, reducing the incidence of HIV, and in those two specific areas we've had really very positive outcomes. I also mentioned we've got our largest mine action programme in the world here, so I think the question for us is how can we support best the development goals of the government, but also of course the people of Cambodia, and actually make a difference here in a very constructive way.
In the future, can you tell us the plan for the future for Cambodia?
You mean for the UK and Cambodia?
Yeah,
well, for us, we're working in all these areas, so we're working on promoting business and trade. And that is both providing support to British companies who want to do business in Cambodia, but also working with the government on issues that affect business, like corruption, like governance, where work is underway to improve the business environment. So I think that's really important. I also want us to boost our political dialogue further and our cooperation on some of the issues I mentioned earlier, like child protection, labour standards, human rights. I think that's an important area of our work. And I'd also like us to continue to support tourists, to support education and all of the other areas I've mentioned. So, as I say, I see the future as being a great opportunity for our two countries working together to support Cambodia's development.
You mentioned something related to justice that you support for the court.
Yes.
Tribunal. But do you think something about the judiciary system in Cambodia that really strongly criticized by international and local NGOs?
Well, I mean, the two things, aren't there? Our support for the Khmer Rouge Tribunal is an extremely important part of our work here. I think the ECCC has got a very important role in delivering reconciliation and justice. And the UK has been one of the major donors to the ECCC. Just in the last few months, we've contributed an extra $3 million. So I think that's very, very important in terms of addressing the historical issues with the Khmer Rouge. And I think that's linked actually to your point about the domestic judicial system, because one of our hopes is that the experiences of running an international hybrid tribunal here will have a very positive effect on the domestic judicial system, so that the people, for example, the lawyers and the judges who work in the ECCC will be able to return to the domestic system and use that experience to deliver international best practice in the domestic system. Now, as I said before, the development challenge here is big, because a lot of the institutions like the judiciary were destroyed effectively under the Khmer Rouge. So I think building capacity among judges and lawyers is a long-term project. It's certainly something that we support, and so this is a work in progress.
Mm-hmm. So, as you know, that Cambodia will have the national election on 28th of July, and the new government will lead the country for another 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
What is your idea for, like, what should they do first for the next 5 years, or what do you think they should do as because you have been working here for many years, so maybe you can give them some advice, or what is your idea on that?
Well, I think that's primarily a decision for the new government, and we have an election campaign to go through before then, so I think these issues will be debated over the next few weeks. But clearly, as a very general point, pursuing Cambodia's development will be important, and that's something that we will want to support.
But how do you see your role as a British ambassador in the election? What can you contribute with?
Okay, well, I think we're doing a number of very practical things to support the election process, and I'm very clear that our role here is about supporting the process.
Yeah.
So we've been invited by the National Election Committee to provide them with technical assistance in ensuring that the electoral process is free and fair. The kind of things we're doing, we're supporting through the EU 4 technical advisors who are working in the National Election Committee, as I say, on the invitation of the National Election Committee. So they will be able to assist with technical issues that come up, but also in helping to implement the recommendations of the last EU observation mission in 2008.
Yeah.
The issues are things like some technical issues about voter lists, but also more general issues like media access. So that's one thing we're doing. And we're also going to be supporting 2 projects, one of them in voter awareness, simply educating voters in the voting process, what is the National Assembly and why is this election important at a very general level. And we're also going to be providing support to some of the observer organisations who operate here in Cambodia. So as I say, the primary role I see is in supporting the National Election Committee and supporting the electoral process.
I'm not sure you mentioned, like, because we will have election in 30 more days, and so far from today on, what are you doing now, like sending the election observers, and how many you send?
Well, we don't have an official EU observation mission. The 3 things we're doing are the 3 things I mentioned. So technical advisors from the EU in the National Election Committee, some voter awareness projects, and also supporting some of the local organisations which will be providing observers.
So it means you don't have the election observer so far for Cambodia election?
No, our focus at the moment is supporting the local observer organisations.
Okay, because as I know, the U.S. embassies they are now considering whether they will send the observer to Cambodia or not, and I just got the response from them, and now the two senators in the U.S. they say they want the U.S. to reduce some assistance to Cambodia because they see a lot of bad points in Cambodia, corruption issue and election, like they say, it's not free and fair yet, something like that. So I'm not sure about, and they also say that the U.S. will urge the other international organizations like EU or UK to do the same thing, like to reduce some fund for Cambodia assistance because they see some bad points. I don't know what is your idea regarding this.
Well, I obviously can't speak for the US or people who said that. I think my focus is very, very clear, and that is to provide constructive support to the National Election Committee on their request at this time. So I think our focus is really on working with them.
Yeah, I'm not sure about your work with EU, but recently EU they issue a statement saying that they want election committee to be free and fair, and they want them to work more to make election like be legitimate. And then the government official, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they reject it. I think maybe you read the news already.
Mm-hmm.
But what is your idea toward the statement? Maybe you work more with EU, or so what is your idea?
I think with what I said about the UK applies to the EU as well, which is that our contribution needs to be constructive, and the statement, of course, was delivered on behalf of all of the EU heads of mission here in Cambodia. And I think if you read the statement, it actually talks about the importance we attach to working with the National Election Committee on these issues, and that's our focus. And of course, the technical advisors who are working in the National Election Committee are at the invitation of the National Election Committee. So that's our focus.
Could you maybe, just another subject, explain about your project about child protection right now? You're
Yes.
having something about a child pass or something right now?
Yes, we have a very good cooperation actually with the UK's Child Exploitation and Online Protection Agency. They work with a number of bodies in Cambodia, like the National Police, the Ministry of Interior, local NGOs, schools and other organisations that deal with young people. Over several years now they've had a lot of project work on awareness raising and capacity building in those organisations so that they can recognise issues of child protection, child exploitation when they occur, and so that they have the tools that they need to tackle those issues and make sure that they don't happen, or at least that they're stopped. So that's one part of the work. Part of this is actually the Child Protection Certificate, which was launched earlier this year, which is essentially something that UK nationals can get, and it's a certificate issued by the UK authorities confirming that that individual does not have any previous criminal record linked to child abuse or exploitation. So the idea is that employers around the world, such as schools, universities or NGOs, they can request of the British national this certificate in order to know that the individual that they are going to recruit does not have a criminal record in this area. So I think it's both linked to the UK nationals applying for jobs, but it's also a general point that educational institutions and NGOs do need to do background checks on their staff before they employ them to make sure that people don't have a history of child abuse or exploitation. So that's the ethos behind it. We're going to carry on our child protection cooperation with the Ministry of Interior and the police and other organisations, as I think it's a really important area of our work.
I think so too.
You mentioned that you are now working to urge the election committee to apply the recommendation from UN Special Reporter. What do you see? Any changes so far? Do you think it will be lead to free and fair election in the future? Like we have only 30 more days to do.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we're on the first day of the election campaign at the moment, so I think the role of the NEC has only just come into effect, and now it's an important time for them to run the election process, and that's where the EU advisors come in. I think I have to say that we've had very positive contacts with the National Election Committee over many months now, which is how we've got to a position where the technical advisors are there. And there have been various technical improvements to the process, which of course we welcome. But as I say, let's see what happens over the next 30 days, because we are at the moment right at the start of the campaign period.
Yeah. Maybe your words to Cambodian people, because like some Cambodian people, like we see the illiteracy rate is high, so some they don't understand about going to vote for the party that they can like develop the country, that they choose the right leader for the country. Maybe what is your word to Cambodian people who will go to vote?
Well, I've said that we're supporting some work on voter awareness. The National Election Committee has done a lot of work in this area. So I think that it's important, of course, that people understand the process and that people engage in debate with the parties and make an informed decision.
Okay.
How can the UK embassy contribute to Cambodia in its development towards being a more globalized country?
Well, it depends what you mean by a globalised country. I think,
Yeah.
what do you mean by a globalised country?
A country heading more towards other countries instead of only focusing on the national issues, but more business with other countries like the UK and like Denmark and other countries like that. Do you think you can contribute to advise them and support them in their struggle against this?
Well, I think it's happening already, to be honest. I've mentioned a whole load of areas where the UK works with Cambodia, both the people of Cambodia and the government of Cambodia. I don't see a particular issue in this regard. Cambodia is obviously one of the 10 members of ASEAN. It's a very active member. It chaired ASEAN last year.
So you're going in the right direction right now, you think?
Well, I think in terms of contacts with other countries, I think these already exist, and there's, as I say, we have very positive cooperation here.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe we want also to know about the idea of UK embassy, like because as you know, Cambodia has strong relation with China and a little bit less with US. What do you see about the relationship between Cambodia and China and Cambodia and US?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean with your comment, but I think our focus in the UK is to have a positive cooperation with Cambodia, and I think it's possible to have positive cooperation with many different countries at once.
I think, Victoria, you have any more question? I look at my list and I think we finished all the question here.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, we may finish.
Do you have any comments you want to?
No.
Can we have your contact and in case everyone?
Yeah, that's fine. You've got the email address, haven't you?
Yeah.
Already?
Okay.
But I can give you my card as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Madam.